I'm going to take a little tangent first. Is that
Okay.
all right? So you brought this up. So in 1995,
Yep.
you were graduating college.
I just graduated college, yep.
Right? And in 1995, I was graduating high school. Right? So that's our gap, right?
Okay.
But little known fact, right? We grew up
We did.
very, very close to one another.
Like a mile.
Like a mile apart. And so I think, how do these two kids from a small coal mining town in eastern PA end up on a stage in Seattle talking about education? And you talked about the skills,
Yep.
right? So if we were in Wilkes-Barre, PA, Nanny Cook, PA, where we lived, how would you tell those people this story? Do they believe you, or are you speaking to a room of believers? Right? I think everyone in this
They don't,
right?
no, and
Right?
it is.
I think that's the problem, right?
It's
That's
a
the
huge
challenge.
problem,
That's the challenge,
and
right?
it's why so much of the country and the world has been left behind, because they don't see value necessarily in the higher education system. And to be honest with you, I don't blame them, because they're those kids going to that college and trying to get credit for an internship and walking around to different offices, and they don't necessarily have parents saying, you know, keep going and asking that question over and over again, because their parents themselves didn't go to college, right? They know that they're paying more and more for higher education, but not necessarily getting that hands-on experience that's going to get them a job after graduation. Or they're getting those soft skills that I was talking about, but they don't necessarily know how to translate them when they come to have an interview with you, Mike, and they want to get a job at AWS, because we're not helping them do that. We have built a higher education system for a certain type of student that it still exists, but is such a small slice of the populations that we need to serve today. And so if you're sitting in Wilkes-Barre today, you're like, higher education's not for me. And even if I think it's for me and I'm willing to take a chance, the chance of success, because I think about this often, because my mother didn't go to college, right? And I think about this often. If I was going to college today, would I actually make it through?
Yeah. We used to, I was at Ohio State before I was here at AWS, and we used to talk about that a lot, right? As a big state institution that was founded from the Morrill Act, right? And when you actually, if you've never read the Morrill Act, it's a really interesting act to go read, so I'd highly recommend do it. It talks about education for the masses, right? And I know you've talked about this before, right? You know, we've moved away from that in those big state institutions in a lot of cases. Now we're trying new models, right, to come back to that, right? So when you think,
let me just
it's important. Yeah.
Just let me go a little deeper on the Morrill Act, because I think it's a great example for what's happening now. Because the Morrill Act, as many of you probably know, was signed in the midst of the Civil War by Abraham Lincoln. And it was before the Civil War that really higher education was seen as a very, it was limited to men, white men, in very specific backgrounds. It wasn't really seen as preparing people for jobs. And then the Morrill Act came and really started to open up, not still fully, but started to open up slowly education for the masses. And it created institutions like Ohio State with engineering and architecture and all of these disciplines, these academic disciplines that actually prepared people for jobs that then developed over the next half century that really, I think, led to the huge development in the United States. So the Morrill Act is really important because it happened at such a pivotal moment in the history of the US. In some ways, I think we're in that same pivotal moment today. We're obviously not in the midst of a civil war. Well, some people might think we are, but it's clear that we are in a very similar moment in the economy, in broader society. I don't know if we need another Morrill Act, but we need something to kind of encourage colleges and universities in this new direction.
So we sit here in a room of change agents, right? These folks have made the trip out here to Seattle to, learn from their peers about education, learn about what AWS is doing in education. What do you think those roadblocks are that we need to start to remove to make that happen?
Well, the first, I think, is around what I was saying around data. Because I think that when I visit college campuses and when I talk to faculty, when I talk to staff, when I talk to administrators, we do have a lot of assumptions about our students, about their lived experiences. I think the pandemic has helped that. I think it really opened people's eyes to the lived experiences of our students. But everybody has a different story on a campus. So you go to a campus and you talk to, one vice president, and you talk to one dean, and you talk to one faculty member. You're going to hear 3 different stories about the issues facing that institution and how to fix it. And you're also going to hear different pieces of data from them. And so I think that really cleaning up our data about our institutions, who our students are, how they're managing to get through the institution, and so that everybody is starting with the same set of facts. Because once you have that, then you can start to figure out what problems you want to solve. And when I think about the institutions that have transformed themselves in higher education, whether it's Georgia State or Arizona State or Elon University or other colleges and universities out there, and to be honest with you, there's not that many of them, but they all started with understanding the data on their students, on their prospective students, on their finances, so that they got everybody on the same page.